The Zarlum Chronicles, Episode 1, Part 3. Amoura and Raven hurriedly threw on their winter equipment, hearing the wolves coming closer. Amoura grabbed her trusty bow and went to her desk, grabbing 3 newly made arrows. Raven grabbed her handgun, loading it with the little amounts of bullets they had left. Magpie grabbed both her revolvers, cocking them, saying,
"Now, Raven, listen to me this time. We only fire these if absolutely necessary. If Amoura doesn't hit her targets, then and only then we fire the guns. But by doing so, they will attract a lot worse, and we do not have the bullets to waste. There can't be any chance of missing something. If you're going to shoot, you may as well hit it. Understand? Just like I taught you."
Raven nodded.
"Yeah, I know."
"When you didn't listen the first fucking time. Hopefully you learned your lesson."
Magpie didn't wear winter clothes because what was the cold going to do, kill her? They all marched outside. Magpie began to check the defenses. The spikes were designed so they were in the wall, so when something hit them, the sticks would get pushed through the fence and into the ground, so they could see where the creature had been hit, and when the spikes hit the ground, they indented to cause even more damage. Amoura and Raven charged up the watchtower stairs, seeing them covered in snow. Raven wasn't very good at shooting from a distance and didn't want to waste bullets, trying, however, still joined Amoura just in case. Luckily, Amoura was an expert with any long-ranged weapon. Her brain was more accelerated than other people's, so she knew a lot of skills. It would take other people years to learn, and that was because of the fact she had a variant of the Red River, making her able to have a much higher intelligence than normal. She believed the Red River brought this effect on because of her mother's intelligence coming down to her. However, she had no idea. Amoura was very good at shooting. However, she did have a bow and arrow, so she had to make calculations taking into account wind and angles to hit the target. She also had to account for the complete darkness and snow jumping around, yelling for her to look at them, so shooting wasn't going to be easy. But she would manage like she had so many times before. Amoura was scanning the trees. Her goggles made it a lot easier to look in the darkness. Amoura kept thinking that she could see things moving in the pure black and white. However, it would just be trees or snow. Finally, after a minute, her eyes zoomed in on a glint of yellow light and the slightest movement. That was all she needed. Her target was now assessed, and she was prepared. She pulled an arrow from behind her, pulling the string back, hearing the sound of it strain against the metal of her bow. She raised her bow to eye level, holding the arrow between 2 fingers, pulling it back as far as it would go. Amoura closed her left eye, which was her weaker eye, raising the bow 30 degrees higher, thinking of how far the arrow had to go, and moved the bow to the right, not lined with the target, but was thinking about the wind. Amoura then started concentrating on her breathing and closed down some of her senses, which was an ability she learned from a lot of practice. She could make her ears tone out sounds and make herself almost deaf, which made it a lot easier to concentrate without hearing the wind whistling in her ears. Instead of the wind, she began to hear her heartbeat clearly in her ears, which would actually help her to shoot. She held the string a little tighter, steadying herself, making sure her footing was correct. Then it was like time itself slowed down for her, and her sensors became prepared. She had to time it with her heartbeat releasing at the time as her heart, but also had to wait for her moment. She inhaled, then released. They watched as the wooden stick flew away from them, spinning. Amoura toned her ears to prepare for the slightest whimper, which happily came from about 50 feet away. They barely managed to see something stumbling around in the darkness. It then fell down the arrow, sticking out its neck. Amoura nodded. Raven smiled, looking around, just in case.
"Good job, Amoura. I think that was the only wolf. Why did it come here?" Amoura thought for a moment. She then looked down, looking a little annoyed at herself.
"I know what caused it to come here. I wasn't thinking." I'm sorry, guys. I fucked up.
Magpie climbed up the tower looking concerned.
What do you mean?
What did you do now?
When I saw that the chicken was dead, I simply threw it out the window thinking it would be buried by the snow. Clearly, it wasn't buried fast enough. It must have smelled the chicken, which brought it over to here.
Magpie shook her head.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I told you, Amoura. How many fucking times have I said? One mistake. One fucking mistake. We die. Those are the facts.
Amoura nodded, shouting,
Oh, and you think I don't know that? But we're not dead, are we? I made a mistake, and I have now dealt with it.
The point is, we're about to take a very dangerous journey, and if we keep making fuck-ups like this, we are not going to fucking make it. Amoura, I made a promise to your mother to make sure you survive, and I intend to keep it. But I can't do that if you're going to be so fucking stupid. Raven shook her head. You're acting like you've never made a single mistake.
Magpie snapped back.
I have made mistakes, but it was in a time when it wouldn't get you killed. And one of my mistakes was agreeing to keep the smartest woman I have probably ever known's daughter to not die. What a stupid thing to agree to. But I'm doing it.
Amoura was about to apologize when suddenly they heard something. They all turned to the fence, hearing something a hell of a lot worse than any wolf could ever be. Magpie jumped down the tower shouting,
Here comes another one of your fuck-ups.
Amoura's head snapped towards the sound, coming closer and closer like a tripod. Fear rushed into her veins like water flooding into her system. As the sounds got closer, Amoura yelled,
Raven, quickly go back in and grab my quiver. It has about 30 arrows in it. We're going to need every single one of them. Go now!
Raven quickly jumped down the tower. She ran to the cabin, tripping as she ran, but got to the door flying through it and going straight to Amoura's desk, grabbing the leather quiver and running back outside with it, throwing it up to Amoura, who caught it still looking at the tree, hearing the sound move around with terrifying speed. Amoura had never faced anything like what she was facing apart from something that attacked her in the city. And even that took 60 arrows before it went down. And she still didn't know if the thing was actually dead or just knocked out. So she didn't know what to do. She yelled down at Magpie.
Get your guns ready!
I already have, moron. Raven, you'll need your gun. This isn't going to be easy.
Raven quickly ran to Magpie's side, looking through one of the holes while Amoura slung the quiver over her shoulder. Amoura turned back to the wall, trying to look for the creature, hoping for the best, that it had just run off into the forest where it came from. However, life had never been that nice to her before. Why change that fact now? Amoura could hear it running around the darkness like a terrifying, multi-legged monster. Raven got an ammo magazine from her back pocket, loading it into her gun, however, it was already too late. A massive black 8-legged spider, the size of an adult elephant, came charging from the darkness it once called home. They could hear the loud bumping of its legs moving it quickly across the ground, occasionally bashing its enormous body into the ground as it moved. It was also snapping its large, sharp fangs menacingly, snarling angrily. Amoura looked through the wall, seeing the large beast approaching fast. Despite its speed, it was capable of moving incredibly fast. It had thin hairs running up, its long, thin legs, and held itself low, making it hard to shoot. The spider was so large, Amoura could see the moonlight reflecting in its 8 large white eyes. Amoura started firing arrows at it, seeing its 8 eyes looking at her with hatred and hunger. It was fast, so it was able to avoid some of the arrows. However, others dug deep into its skin. Horrifyingly, though, it didn't seem to care. Amoura had mastered firing the arrows, so she was able to fire 20 arrows a minute, but it wasn't enough. She felt a ball of fear explode in her brain when she saw the spider literally jump to avoid the arrows. She knew that if it got close enough, it could very easily jump over the wall. Then there would be nothing stopping it from killing them. Raven realized that truth the same time Amoura did. realizing the arrows weren't going to be enough to hold it very long, so started shooting bullets at the creature, hearing it scream in pain. Magpie started doing the same with her revolvers, however it realized they were shooting through the holes, so it moved out the way. Horribly, Magpie was going to have to get invasive. Magpie had an insane idea. She decided to use an ability she had gained at some stage in the past she couldn't remember. She closed her eyes, concentrating. Raven watched as it looked like Magpie's body did a strange flip while still standing. As she flipped, her body got smaller, shrinking into a magpie. It opened its wings, flying over the wall towards the spider. Raven looked down at Magpie, looking scared.
What the fuck are you doing, Magpie? The magpie did the flip again in midair, becoming herself again, landing on her feet, saying, "I'm improvising. Do you want to survive?" Magpie, being outside the compound, immediately started jumping and waving her arms.
Hey, asshole! Over here! Over here, you big ugly fucker! Look at me! I'm a target! A big, juicy target! Come and take a bite out of this arse!
The spider turned its attention away from Amoura and Raven to her. Any other woman would have been terrified, but Magpie was horribly used to being the distraction. The spider began to move towards her, its blue blood dripping from the many holes caused by the arrows and bullets. But it didn't care. The spider saw Magpie as just a little bird running across the ground. It decided to see her as an easy target, just like so many creatures before it, having no idea how uneasy she was going to be. Magpie stood waiting for it to get closer, muttering,
Come on, you big ugly fucker. Come on, I want you to do it. Come on. Come on, hit me.
When it was close enough, Magpie started running, so of course the spider charged after her like a multi-legged tank. Magpie ran around the cabin with the spider chasing behind her. She jumped in the air, flipping herself backwards, shooting the spider as she flew. She landed on her feet behind the spider, then had to avoid a hit from the spider's legs by spinning herself around, shooting it as she spun herself around. Magpie shot it in the eye as she ran around it, then placed herself in a very special spot waiting for the spider to make its move. The spider proceeded to jump forward, pushing Magpie to the ground. It snapped its large fangs down on Magpie's neck, pouring her blood everywhere. Magpie tried to shoot it, however, she was out of ammo. She flipped the gun over, slamming the handle into the spider's face. It jumped back from shock and pain. Magpie barely had time to react before the spider plunged its pincers back around her neck. After a minute of struggling, Raven and Amoura heard the snap of Magpie's neck as the spider broke it, killing Magpie instantly. For now. The spider continued to move forward, not seeing where it was going because of its damaged eyes. It stumbled forward, slamming directly into the wall, being impaled by 5 long, sharp spikes. It tried to move, but just ended up making blue blood shoot everywhere. The spider screeched as its legs circled up, shaking and becoming horribly stiff. Its eyes stopped moving, and it was dead. Raven and Amoura waited for a second just in case, then jumped down the tower, a little scared that it was just waiting for them to go over to it so it could attack. However, even if it was waiting, it was impaled on the spikes and couldn't move even if it wanted to. Amoura and Raven came outside. They were very hesitant to approach the spider, holding their weapons ready just in case it was faking its death. Raven was absolutely terrified of spiders, and Amoura was scared of anything that would stop her from being alive. However, in her mind, that was just common sense, despite what Magpie says about her not having any. Amoura grabbed a stick from the ground, bravely poking the spider in the back, which was a bad idea because it made all the spider's large legs twitch at the same time, making its blood shoot from all the holes in its body. Amoura and Raven instantly went into fight or flight, and chose flight, flinching away a few feet. Raven lifted her gun, however, before she could shoot. Amoura grabbed her hand, shaking her head.
Don't waste any bullets. Allow me, just in case.
Amoura then fired an arrow into its still open eye. However,
She didn't need to, because it was definitely dead. Raven stepped back a little.
Why did it move?
Amoura sighed.
Muscle spasm, maybe?
Do spiders even have muscles?
Amoura looked at her.
Well, how the bleeding hell do I know? The point is, it's dead. Probably. I need to get the arrows out of it.
Raven shook her head. Yes, you do. Amoura looked at her.
What's the problem?
I ain't going near it.
Amoura chuckled.
It's dead.
Yeah, this is the part of the movie when you get your head bit off. And that's going to have to be a solo adventure for you. I'm checking on Magpie.
Amoura approached it, beginning to pull her arrows out so she could use them again. While she did that, Raven went over to Magpie, who was still laying in the snow. She was still dead. However, Raven knew what happened next. Magpie shook back to life, gasping for air. Strangely, all the blood was reversing back into her wound, which eventually sealed itself shut. Magpie looked around and could feel her neck was still broken. So she simply just snapped it back into place like it was normal, making a horrible cracking sound. She stood up, massaging her neck and brushing the snow off her clothes.
You know, I am immortal. However, I still feel pain. And that hurt like a motherfucker.
Have you ever been killed by a spider before?
Magpie shrugged.
How the fuck do I know?
Raven went over to her.
How long does it take for the pain to go away? It already has. It just hurt at the time. It feels weirdly stiff.
Meanwhile, Amoura got all the arrows. She began to look at the spider. She hadn't seen one of that size before, and was admiring it. It was lucky she did, because she noticed something very strange and turned to Magpie.
Hey, could you come and tell me if this is normal?
Magpie went over.
Yeah, it's a spider. They're everywhere. This one is just a little bigger than the ones in your average garden. What about it?
Amoura pointed to all the cuts up its back, like it had been hit by a whip. It also had thick black chains around its neck that they couldn't see when they were fighting it. Raven kept her distance as Magpie and Amoura approached it. Despite her keeping her distance, she asked,
So, how did it get like that? Do you think people somehow kept this as a pet or a weapon? And it simply got free?
Magpie and Amoura thought differently. They both stood up looking into the trees. Magpie stepped forward.
No. I think someone has kept this as a weapon. They've tamed it somehow. But it didn't escape.
What do you mean?
Asked Raven, standing up and also looking at the trees. Magpie looked a little worried.
Well, I think whoever owned this thing released it.
On what? Magpie paused, still scanning the trees.
On us. It's sort of like a foot soldier meant to deal with us, so the people don't have to.
Amoura nodded.
Yeah. We need to get back inside right now. Lock up the doors and check the fence, then look from the watchtower. Do it now, come on!
They went to head for the gates. However, it was already too late for them. They got about halfway to the door, when suddenly, to all their shock, Magpie's head exploded into blood and brains. She fell to her knees as they heard the loud popping of a gunshot being fired from the forest. Magpie fell down, pouring her crimson blood all over the white snow from the side of her head, which now had an enormous hole drilled through it by a bullet. Raven and Amoura immediately got down low, holding their weapons ready, hearing people coming towards them. The people weren't speaking any language Amoura or Raven could speak. They were just grunting and screaming from a distance. Suddenly, two people came running at them, screaming and shouting like angry chimps, being able to move faster than any man ever could. One was holding a gun, and the other was holding a sharp silver machete. Amoura swiftly raised her bow, shooting the man with the gun directly between the eyes. He fell back, bleeding into the snow, shaking a little. Meanwhile, The blood seemed to strangely pour back into Magpie's head as the bullet pushed itself out her head, bouncing away. A moment later, she shook awake again, gasping for air, sitting up. The second man grabbed the gun and went to shoot Amoura. However, Magpie got to her feet, running in the way of being shot 3 times in the stomach. She walked forward in pain, shooting the man in the stomach. He fell to his knees, holding his stomach groaning. Magpie raised the gun, shooting him in the throat, killing him. As he fell down, he used the machete, stabbing it into Magpie's shoulder. Magpie stumbled back a little, then turned to Raven and Amoura.
Are you two okay?
She said through gritted teeth, trying to fight her way through the pain shooting through her body. They nodded. Magpie looked annoyed, grabbing the blade of the machete, yanking it out, throwing it to the ground.
God damn. Healing factor, you know how this works. Usually I wouldn't use a gun, but kind of pointless now we've made enough noise. Look away if you don't mind. I don't like people watching.
Amoura and Raven looked away. Magpie sighed, then put the gun in her mouth, shooting herself down the throat. She fell to the side, spreading her blood and bits of flesh all over the snow. Amoura and Raven turned back around. The 3 original bullets in her stomach pushed out her body, falling to the ground as the blood went back in. The cut from the machete fixed itself, and even her suit began to mend itself. The newly formed hole in the back of her neck started to seal itself. The bits of flesh covered on the ground started to fly back to her until there wasn't a single cut on her. They waited a moment. Then she came back alive, shaking and gasping for air. The thing she hated about her healing factor the most was the fact that it didn't work, if she was alive. The moment she died, it would work, so she could deal with a huge amount of pain. But she would have to be dead for the cuts and everything to go away. She stood up, shaking, looking around.
Jesus, it feels so horrible. But that's not the worst thing I've ever survived. I've done a lot more.
Amoura nodded.
Yeah, you told me once about the nuke you stood on.
Magpie nodded, itching the back of her head with the gun.
Yeah, that was taking the fucking piss.
Are you okay?
Yes, because of this pissing curse. I'm always fine. I'm never not going to be fine.
Amoura sighed.
I meant mentally.
Magpie shook her head.
No, God no. I don't know if I've ever been mentally okay a moment in my life.
Amoura went over to the men. She leaned down and was shocked like Raven, who joined her side because both of them were just wearing shorts. Nothing else but shorts and strange animal masks.
How in the hell are these guys even alive out here? It's freezing. It's like -5 degrees.
Magpie joined them.
They're insane, and it seems that they are so insane they have lost their survival instinct, and the Red River must help somehow. You know, there used to be a small cult of people who believed that once you know you're not meant to feel pain or sensation, you have nothing else to fear. Nonsense, of course, but in these days, nothing is nonsense.
Raven looked confused.
Is the Red River even able to do that? That's the problem. The virus has an infinite number of variants, and I have seen the virus do some completely insane and unbelievable things.
Yeah, but getting rid of the survival instinct, is that even possible?
Magpie nodded, replying,
Oh yeah, you can be insane. But every person has a basic survival instinct, so if you lose that, you've gone completely insane. There was a condition about it, but I can't remember what it's called. I remember a story of a man eating some guy's face and the police not being able to get him off. Maybe that was a dream. I don't know.
Amoura slowly walked forward. Amoura arrived at one of the men laying face down in the snow. She used her foot to kick him over so she could see him. She noticed one of them wearing a pig mask. Amoura thought it was just a mask of a pig, but no, it was the cut-off face of an actual pig. She bent down and tried to pull it off to see the man's face, However, she strangely couldn't. She ran her finger along the inside of the mask, realizing the horrible truth. The mask was stitched onto the man's face with string. She could feel where it had become all infected and horrible. Amoura looked at Magpie.
These guys literally have masks stitched to their face!
Magpie shook her head.
I remember something like this happening a while ago. Your parents fought someone who did stuff like this. Those guys were fucked up, even for Dirham's insane standards.
Raven looked at her. Was that before or after they met me? Magpie shrugged.
I have no idea. I don't even remember the guy's name.
Raven asked. Well, what happened to him? He might still be alive out there, and did this to these people. Magpie thought for a moment, looking at the bodies in the snow.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think they ever killed him, and this was his MO. I honestly don't remember if they killed him. It was about 30 years ago, and I wasn't there. It was just a rumor. I do know he was in the city when everything went down. And maybe they killed him when he tried to attack them. And this is some copycat. I know he was trying to make a really fucked up religion. Maybe this is it. Of all the things that could have survived, of course his fucked up religion survived.
Amoura stood up.
Fascinating history lesson, but we really need to get back into the house, quickly, before we meet more of them. Pigface and Skinny Boy here would never have been able to catch that spider on their own. Come on, we have to get inside.
Magpie nodded.
Finally, a sensible suggestion.
They began moving to the doors. Magpie smiled.
You got that attitude from Estella, didn't you?
Amoura smiled.
Yeah, it's one of the things she taught me.
Raven asked. Why? What was she like? Magpie and Amoura smiled at each other. Magpie explained.
It's difficult to explain what Estella's attitude was like. You just had to meet her. She was an arsehole. But a good arsehole. A respectable arsehole. Sometimes she was a real pain in the arse. And she knew that. But she did it anyway. She was a good woman.
Amoura smiled.
One of the best women I've ever known.
When they got back inside the base, Amoura closed the large doors and began placing the barrels in front of the door again for protection. While she did that, Raven started putting up some bells around the doors which would ring if someone tried to push the door, so they had an alarm system. They then started going back to the cabin, all exhausted after the fight they just had. They went into the cabin. When they stepped in, Amoura and Raven started removing their winter clothes, while Magpie started locking everything up like the windows and the doors. So even if, in the slim 1,000,000 to 1 chance, something managed to get past the walls, it would be more difficult to get in the house. When Amoura and Raven had everything off, Raven went to the front door, placing across her bells inside, just in case they didn't hear the first set of them. They were all paranoid. However, at the end of the world, that was just the norm. When they were completely satisfied that no one could get in, they started getting everything ready to go sleep. Magpie went to the sink, saying,
Amoura, tonight could you sleep next to your bow and some arrows? You know, just in case there is another attack.
Amoura nodded.
Yeah, good shout.
She grabbed her bow and arrow set and threw them up to the bed. The cabin was designed so the beds were above the kitchen, and they got to them from a ladder next to the fireplace, which was pushed forward. The chimney went up from the fireplace and was against the wall to the beds, so they could get some heat from the fire when the heating was off. The beds were facing each other with their storage cupboards next to the beds, leaving a gap between the wall and the cupboard where they both had windows to the outside, so they could look outside just in case something attacked, and it was also a pretty view. Magpie went over to the fireplace. She grabbed a jug she had just filled with water, throwing it on the fire, which would have plunged the house into darkness. But they had lights on. Magpie and Raven worked together to start lighting candles, so the house wasn't completely dark. They only lit them on the bottom area so Amoura and Raven could sleep without light, and Magpie didn't have to just sit in darkness all night. While they did the candles, Amoura went over to a panel next to the radio desk with a few switches. She started flipping a few switches, making the lights overhead turn off and all the power systems turn off. Amoura turned to the others.
All right, I've switched off the power. I'm about to turn on the heating so we don't die in the night of frostbite.
Magpie sat down, shaking her head.
You know, I've lived so long. I've weirdly forgotten that other people have to do things to survive. They don't just walk the world with complete immunity. I forget that you guys have to not freeze, and you guys don't have to not care about things.
Yeah, that's what's dangerous, is the fact you keep doing things that won't get you killed and just act like we'll be fine.
I've tried to stop doing that.
Raven looked a little worried.
Do you think there are more of them out there?
Magpie nodded, replying,
Oh, I have no doubt of it. But I don't think they'll be coming back here. However, just be careful. Like I said, Amoura, stay next to your bow and we'll be fine.
Raven looked a little concerned. Well, if 2 people from their tribe disappeared, they're definitely going to notice. Magpie shook her head.
Whoever these guys are, they must be in a big group of people to be able to catch and basically tame a spider. They don't seem to have any viable form of communication, so that makes it a lot harder for them. By the time they notice that the people have gone missing, they'll send out a team of people to find them, having no idea where they are. Eventually, they'll come across this cabin, and when that happens, we'll be long gone.
Raven asked.
What if 2 people ran forward and another one went back to their camp and got some more of them? What if they're making a trap outside right now?
Magpie shook her head.
No. Trust me. These people aren't of mind. To all intents and purposes, those people are no longer people. They don't have the minds to send people back to base. Believe me, we're going to be fine. I've been around long enough to know what people are like. By the time they find out anyone is missing and find this cabin, we'll be halfway to China. And if they follow us to China just to kill us, I'll be very impressed and just let them kill us. You.
Raven shook her head. You bloody well will not.
If I have learned anything in my life, it's always be with the people who have the biggest guns. And if that's not you, that's on you.
She saw the worry on their face.
Oh, come on, guys. Lighten up. I'm kidding. I'll always be with you. I made a promise to your parents, Amoura, and I met yours, Raven, so that favor transfers. In the slim chance they do come back, they'll see we killed a spider and run shit scared. But if they don't, I'll be here waiting for the fuckers. I'm more scared by the fact we were all firing guns. Maybe they won't be the only problem we will deal with tonight. But don't worry, I'll be here to make sure that doesn't happen.
Amoura switched on the heat, causing them to be hit by a large gust of warm air. Amoura and Raven went up the ladder to their bedroom areas to begin getting ready for bed, while Magpie just sat below staring at the front door, which was usually what she did every night. Just sat around. She removed a set of cards from her pocket and started playing a few card games with herself just to pass the time while constantly looking at the door. They started getting ready. Amoura removed her leggings, putting them in a drawer of a cupboard. She then removed her dress, putting it on a hanger. Raven took her tank top off, smiling at Amoura.
You really do like that dress, don't you?
Oh yeah, I love it. It's part of my family history. I can't not love it.
They both didn't have nightwear. They just slept in their underwear. Amoura moved her bow off the bed, putting it against the wall, then sat on her bed. The moment her body hit the bed, she heard the springs under her clink and buckle under her weight. It wasn't the most comfortable bed, but it was enough, and she was used to an uncomfortable bed. Amoura shifted herself a little, trying to find a comfortable spot where springs weren't poking into her back, managing to eventually find it. Amoura grabbed her thick blue blanket, pulling it over herself, making herself comfortable. She saw Raven in the corner do the same, rolling onto her side like Amoura did. Amoura really liked the location of her bed because it was right next to a window with a perfect view of the forest and mountains in the distance, and that always helped her sleep. Amoura watched the snow dancing around for a moment. Amoura got herself comfortable looking out the window, then said,
Good night, Raven.
Good night, Amoura. We have a big day tomorrow. Amoura smiled.
Yeah, it better not be snowing or it will be a bitch to drive.
Raven agreed.
Yeah, it will be a nightmare. But to be fair, I'm always terrified when we go out in the car.
Only because I never got a license. But a license is to prove you can drive safely. Driving safely at the end of the world isn't really necessary.
Raven nodded.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Still scary, though.
Don't worry, it'll be fine.
Amoura raised her voice.
Good night, Magpie!
Good night, Amoura and Raven. I'll wake you up in the morning.
Thank you!
Magpie quickly got bored with her card game, having played it millions of times before, so she put the cards away back into her pocket, then placed a chair in the middle of the bottom area, sitting down, watching the front door pointing her gun forward. She then went into a daydream-like state, just staring forward, shutting down as much of her brain as she could. Forever conscious, unable to sleep if she didn't, she would go insane. After half an hour of silence, Amoura, like most nights, couldn't sleep. She rolled over, looking at the snow out the window, trying to imagine what her life would have been like if the world hadn't ended. However, she didn't like to do that, because it made her feel sad, knowing that it was a life she would never be allowed to have, and a life that had been planned out by her parents. Even if the world did get fixed, her parents were still dead, and her aunt was still missing, probably dead. So her life would never be normal. However, she was used to it. She was born right as the world collapsed, so she hadn't known it any other way. However, she did wish she could have lived the life her parents wanted her to live, from what she had heard. It would have been nice. She felt bad for Raven because she had known the world before the chaos. She couldn't remember it because she was young, but still. Amoura sat up. She looked across the room to see if Raven was asleep, and saw her snoozing in the corner happily. Magpie wouldn't care what she was doing. She was daydreaming, which was basically her sleep, and it was hard to get her out of that trance. Amoura grabbed a blue shoebox from under her bed, closed with a rubber band. She untied it, casting it aside, then opened the box slowly and carefully. There wasn't much in the box, just her most important valuables in the world, so naturally there were only a few. She grabbed a small blanket, which was the blanket she was born with, pushing it aside, picking up a key, which was a very special key because it could open all locks, or it used to before it had been broken. Now it was just a relic of a recent past. Even if she fixed it, the key still wouldn't work. She had already tried. She wasn't sure if it was enchanted or what, but somehow it opened every lock, including digital locks. Amoura placed it neatly on the bed, then grabbed out something else sentimental to her. It was a portable CD player. She grabbed some batteries, putting them in the back, then started playing the disc inside, playing the Life is Strange soundtrack, an old game her aunt used to love, and she really loved the music, always listening to it, so it bought Amoura a lot of peace. Amoura placed it on the bed, continuing to listen to it. She picked up and unfolded a yellow note, being very careful with it, because it meant a lot to her, and no one but her had ever seen it. She began to read the note in her head.
My dearest Amoura, at the time of writing this, you are only 10 years old, playing with Wednesday. For the past few weeks, I have been feeling more sick every day, and these days, I know what that means. Soon, I am going to die, which scares me, because I know that in the event of my death, you will still be alive and will be alone, and I don't know if you can handle that. But you should have Estella with you. However, if somehow you are alone, then don't worry. Just use all the skills I taught you to survive, and remember that I will always look over you and help, even after I am dead. Please remember that you were my rock through these 10 years. You are the only reason I stayed alive, so I could protect you and watch you grow up. And if I'm going to die, I'm glad it will be for you. I used to be terrified of death. However, now I am not afraid. I am going to be able to see your mother again. Just make sure you don't join us too quick. Good luck out there, kiddo. I know you will do great. And make sure that you stay pure of heart, because you have heart. And that is very hard to come by these days. In all my years of creating things with your mother, the most amazing thing that we ever made was you. I love you, always and forever. Your loving other mother. Love, Delilah.
Amoura bit her lip, trying not to cry, then held the letter close to her chest, looking up at the ceiling, as a single tear fell from her eye. It had been 20 years since that note was made, and yet Amoura always cried when she read it. The mention of her first mother written by her other mother. It always got complicated, but Amoura had two mothers. Amoura looked out the window down at the two graves of her parents, who she had buried a long time ago.
I won't let you down, mothers.
Amoura put the letter on the bed. She folded it neatly, so it didn't get damaged in any way. She looked back in the box, pulling out a black phone inside a red case. The phone had a large crack down the screen. It hadn't worked for years and belonged to her mother. Amoura rummaged around more, pulling out something from her other mother. It was an old pop vinyl of Blue Meth Walter White, which was very rare. She smiled at it, knowing what it meant to both her mothers. It was a little damaged, but she was lucky to have picked it up at all. The others were broken. In her hands was probably the last pop vinyl in the world. It wasn't actually a time for collecting, and she loved thinking about what her mother's reaction would be, knowing that her pop vinyl had lived through it all to eventually arrive at her daughter, who would keep it safe for her. It was a good thought that kept her going. She then noticed something else, which made her always smile at the sight of. She carefully removed a photo of 5 people. The person furthest on the right was one of her mothers. She was originally born as a male who then identified as a woman. She had long black hair, wearing a white shirt, a blue jacket, and black jeans. She was standing next to a pretty woman who had long curly black hair and wore the same dress as the one Amoura wore in the day. A lot of people commented on the fact that Amoura looked just like her mother, apart from her eyes and her height. The person in the middle, looking a little bored, was Magpie, looking exactly the same. Because of course she did. She had her arms crossed, looking like she didn't want her photo taken. The other two always made Amoura feel bad. The first was her aunt called Estella, who was very out there in her style and attitude. She wore a red corset, black leather shorts, a leather trench coat, and a large black pirate hat. Next to her was her girlfriend Clara, who had blue hair, a black and green shirt with leather trousers, and just like her girlfriend, a leather trench coat. Amoura felt sad about them, because they had been kidnapped along with their daughter many years ago, and Amoura could only assume that they had been killed. If not, she hoped they were okay, if they were still alive. They'd have come for her by now. She held the photo against her chest, beginning to cry a little.
I miss Estella so much. I wish I could have my family back.
She placed the photo and note back into the box. She then put the box back under her bed. She only saw that box as the life she couldn't ever have, but that didn't mean we couldn't dream. Amoura laid back on her bed, looking out the window, remembering what her aunt would always say before she went to sleep.
Even in the darkness of nights, you have to remember that there will always be stars. And you are one of the stars. However, you have to remember that you can trust nothing in this world, because even in darkness, your own shadow disappears.
She smiled as the stars twinkled down on her like they were eyes blinking as they watched the planet spin away. Amoura loved to watch the stars because she loved knowing they were light years away, and the light from those stars had traveled millions of miles just to make it to her eyes. It reminded her of how small she was in the universe, and that was strangely comforting, thinking that she wasn't the only one out there in the universe. She glanced down at her parents' graves outside.
Good night, Oswin and Delilah. Sweet dreams forever.
She then fell asleep, still listening to the music from the CD player. Something that always brought her peace. Something hard to come by when the entire world around her is constructed for the complete opposite. End of episode 1. Part 3.